For centuries, the story of the Philippines has often started in the same place, with the arrival of Spanish ships in 1521. It's the standard narrative, the one taught for generations, painting a picture of scattered, primitive tribes discovered and civilized by Europeans. It's a story of salvation, of a fragmented land supposedly unified by an outside force. We see images of Ferdinand Magellan planting a cross on a foreign shore. And we're told this is where Philippine history truly begins. But what if that story, the one we all know, is wrong? What if the very foundation of that narrative is a myth, a colonial story designed to justify centuries of occupation? What if the Philippines Magellan's fleet stumbled upon wasn't a collection of mud hut villages at all, but a thriving, interconnected world of organized states and skilled sailors, trading with the great empires of Asia? This isn't a story of what might have been. It's the story of what was. This is the history that was pushed aside, the civilization that was almost forgotten. Long before the first Spanish galleon ever crossed the Pacific, the archipelago was a vibrant tapestry of culture, commerce, and power. This is the Philippines that history tried to forget. A world of sophisticated societies, powerful leaders, and a fierce independence that defined it for thousands of years. This is the story of the Philippines before Spain. So, if not scattered tribes, what was the true foundation of this pre-colonial world? The answer lies in a single, powerful concept: the barangay. Today, a barangay is the smallest unit of government in the Philippines, like a village or a district. But its original meaning is so much deeper. The word itself comes from balangay, the name of the large plank boats that carried the first Austronesian peoples to the islands thousands of years ago. That isn't just a fun fact. It's the philosophical bedrock of their society. The community was the boat, and the people were its crew, navigating life together. A typical barangay was a self-sufficient community, usually made up of 30 to 100 families. These weren't sprawling cities in the European sense, but tightly knit, independent settlements. Each one was its own political, economic, and social unit. There was no single king ruling the entire archipelago. Instead, there was a complex network of these autonomous barangays, sometimes forming alliances, sometimes competing, but always sovereign. This decentralization wasn't chaos. It was a sign of incredible adaptability, life centered on the extended family. Their homes were marvels of sustainable design. Built on stilts, these houses were made of bamboo with thatched nipa roofs, perfect for surviving floods and staying cool in the tropical heat. They often had a batalon, an open-air back porch for washing and other chores. One of the most clever features was a retractable staircase, which could be pulled up at night as a defense against rival groups or wild animals. The yard below wasn't just empty space. It was used for raising chickens and pigs, and for pounding rice, the staple of their diet. Their diet was rich and varied, sourced from the land and sea around them. Rice was the heart of every meal. It was supplemented with root crops like taro and yams, a huge variety of fish, and fruits like bananas. For special occasions, they'd enjoy chicken, pork, or goat. Food was traditionally eaten by hand, a practice that underscored a direct connection to the nourishment the earth provided. The economic engine of the barangay was farming and fishing. Many communities practiced swidden agriculture, or kaingin, clearing land in a way that, when managed correctly, was sustainable and worked in harmony with the forest. Their connection to the sea was just as profound. They were expert fishermen, using huge salambao nets and building fish pens for aquaculture. They had even mastered night fishing, understanding the rhythms of the moon and the tides. This deep respect for nature wasn't just part of their economy. It was their worldview. The barangay wasn't just a place to live. It was a complete, self-reliant world. But who held these independent communities together? Who guided them through trade, conflict, and daily life? The answer is the Datu. And right away, we have to dismantle another colonial myth. The Spanish saw these leaders and used the words they knew: kings, princes, and nobles. But calling a Datu a king in the European sense completely misses the point. A Datu wasn't an autocrat who ruled by divine right. His authority wasn't simply inherited, it was earned. He was a protector, a negotiator, a warrior, and a father figure to his people. His leadership depended on his bravery in battle, his wisdom, and the charisma to command the respect of his followers. He was the chief, but he ruled by consulting a council of elders. His first duty was the welfare of his barangay. These leaders had different titles across the islands. While Datu was common, more powerful chiefs who led larger communities or alliances were called a Rajah or a Lakan. They were at the top of a clear and sophisticated social structure, which was generally divided into three classes. First was the nobility. This included the Datu, his family, and other nobles known as the Maharlika or Timawa. These were not idle aristocrats. The Maharlika were a warrior class, respected freemen who didn't pay regular tribute, but were bound to answer the Datu's call to war, bringing their own weapons and armor. The Timawa were also freemen, often serving as the Datu's companions and administrators. This ruling class was distinguished by what they wore: fine silks and cottons, intricate gold jewelry, and the right to trade certain elite goods. Below them were the general freemen, the everyday people of the barangay. These were the farmers, fishermen, and artisans who owned their own land and homes. They paid tribute to the Datu, usually with a portion of their harvest, and in return, they received protection and leadership. They were the backbone of the community, and there was social mobility. A freeman could rise in status through courage or skill. At the bottom of the social ladder was a class often mislabeled as slaves, the alapin. The European concept of chattel slavery doesn't quite fit their situation. A person could become an alapin through debt, as punishment for a crime, or by being captured in a raid. But it was not always a permanent, hopeless state. Alapins had rights. They could own property, marry, and, crucially, they could earn or buy their freedom. This class was even further divided. The Alaping Namamahay owned their own homes and served a master part-time, while the Alaping Esagigilid were dependents living in their master's house. While this system was certainly hierarchical and involved bondage, it was a complex social contract with paths to freedom, distinct from the dehumanizing chattel slavery of the West. These communities were not living in isolation, not even close. The idea of a disconnected, primitive Philippines is probably the biggest fiction of the whole colonial story. Long before European maps even had these islands on them, their people were masters of the sea, woven into the vast, ancient tapestry of Asian trade. How connected were they? The evidence is staggering. For over 1,000 years, the Philippine archipelago was a hub of maritime commerce. Its location made it a natural crossroads for a trade network that stretched from China to India, Arabia, and the rest of Southeast Asia. And they weren't just passively participating. They were skilled and respected players in this globalized economy. Their power was built on advanced maritime technology. While their Austronesian ancestors began arriving by sea around 3000 BCE, they later perfected incredible plank boats called the balangay. Archaeological discoveries in Butuan have unearthed these vessels, some dating back to well before the Spanish arrival, proving their amazing seamanship. These were not simple canoes, they were sophisticated ships that could carry huge amounts of cargo and dozens of people across the open ocean. From their ports, a wealth of goods flowed out to the world. The islands were rich in resources that were prized on the international market. They exported huge amounts of gold, beeswax, spices, pearls, and rice. In return, they imported goods that tell a story of a cosmopolitan society. From China came porcelain and silk, from India, metals and textiles, and from Arabia, perfumes. The discovery of Tang Dynasty ceramics and other artifacts from across Asia proves just how deeply connected they were. Several port states became incredibly wealthy from this trade. The Kingdom of Tondo, in the Manila Bay area, was a dominant force. The Ming Dynasty's historical records, the Ming Shilu, note envoys from Luzon arriving at the imperial court as early as 1373, recognizing Tondo's rulers as kings. Further south, the Rajahs of Butuan in Mindanao was another powerhouse. Chinese records mention a diplomatic mission from a Butuan ruler arriving at the imperial court on March 17, 1001 AD. For centuries, Butuan was a major international port and a center for gold processing. This constant exchange wasn't just about goods, it was about ideas. It was through these trade routes that Islam was introduced to the southern Philippines. Early contacts by Arab traders date to the mid-13th century, and the faith was firmly established in a place like Sulu by the 14th century, adding another rich layer to the island's culture. But a society is more than its politics and economy. It's defined by its soul, its beliefs, its knowledge, and its art. The cultural world of the pre-colonial Philippines was every bit as rich as its social and economic systems. Their spiritual world was largely animistic. This was a worldview that saw everything as alive and imbued with spirit. These spirits, known as Anito or Diwata, were believed to live in nature, in ancient trees, mighty rivers, and towering mountains. Ancestors were also deeply revered, their spirits seen as active guides and protectors. This wasn't a religion of distant gods, but an intimate daily relationship with the spiritual forces all around them. At the very heart of this spiritual life was a powerful figure, the Babaylan. Usually women, though some men could fill the role, the Babaylan were the community's spiritual leaders, healers, and keepers of their sacred stories. They were the bridge between the physical and spiritual worlds. A Datu might lead in war, but he would consult the Babaylan on all big decisions because they were the ones who could read the omens and interpret the will of the spirits. They performed rituals for a good harvest, healed the sick with an incredible knowledge of herbal medicine, and guided the souls of the dead into the afterlife. The high status of the Babaylan points to one of the most remarkable things about this society: the elevated position of women. In sharp contrast to the patriarchal systems in Europe and much of Asia at the time, lineage was traced through both the mother and the father. Women could own property, engage in trade, and even initiate divorce. If there was no male heir, a woman could become a Datu in her own right. For centuries, women were respected and powerful figures at the very center of community life. This sophisticated culture was also a literate one. The colonial myth that the Spanish brought education to an illiterate people is shattered by the existence of Babayan. This was one of several indigenous scripts used across the islands, derived from ancient Indian writing systems. It was an elegant script used to write poetry, messages, and keep records. They often wrote on perishable materials like bamboo, which is why so few examples survive. But artifacts like the Laguna copperplate inscription, a legal document from 900 AD, proved that writing and a complex legal system were established long before the Spanish ever arrived. Their culture expressed itself in countless other ways. Warriors wore armor made of carabao hide and wielded deadly swords like the campilan. Life was filled with music from gongs, flutes, and drums, and the telling of epic stories. Even their burial practices showed great artistry, with leaders sometimes buried in coffins lined with gold, or in magnificent jars like the Manunggul jar, which depicts two souls sailing a boat into the afterlife. This was a culture of depth and beauty, fully formed and uniquely its own. The world that existed before 1521 was not empty. It was a vibrant, complex, and deeply connected civilization. It was a world of independent barangays, built on the idea of a ship's crew working together. It was a world led by respected Datus, not ruled by tyrants, with a social order that valued mutual obligation. It was a world of master seafarers who were major players in the Asian economy, trading their gold for porcelain and spices for silk. And it was a world of profound spirituality, guided by the wisdom of the Babaylan, where women held high status and literacy was a mark of a sophisticated culture. This is the society that was met by colonizers who couldn't or wouldn't understand it. They saw decentralization and called it chaos. They saw animism and called it paganism. They saw a different way of life and called it savage. And so, they began the centuries-long process of pushing this history aside, writing a new one where they were the heroes. But history can't be erased forever. It lives on in the language, in the traditions, in the archaeological record, and in the spirit of a people reclaiming their story. Understanding this forgotten world isn't just about correcting the record. It's essential to understanding Filipino identity today. It's a reminder that the story of the Philippines does not begin with subjugation, but with a legacy of strength, ingenuity, and independence. What aspect of pre-colonial Philippines do you want to learn about next? Which fact from this history surprised you the most? Let us know in the comments below.